From now on, you are going to listen to her." "My son, Ethan," shouted those words while his index finger pointed directly at Tiffany, his wife. The same woman who had been living in my condo for 6 months, acting as if she had bought it with her own money. I was sitting on the sofa in the living room, holding a cup of tea I had just poured for both of them. My hands were trembling slightly, not from fear, but from a contained rage that had been building up in my chest for months. I looked at my son, this 32-year-old man whom I had raised alone, working double shifts at the manufacturing plant to give him an education and food on the table. Now, that same son was looking at me as if I were a stranger, an intruder in my own home. Tiffany was standing by the window, arms crossed, with a satisfied smile painted on her perfectly made-up face. She was wearing an elegant black dress that probably cost more than $400, while I was wearing the same worn-out blouse I had owned for 3 years. Her eyes gleamed with victory, as if she had just won a battle I did not even know we were fighting. "Did you hear me, Mom?" Ethan insisted, approaching me with heavy steps. "Tiffany is the one who runs this house now. She decides what happens here. She makes the rules. And you are going to obey her." I placed my cup on the coffee table with care. That small gesture was enough to make Tiffany smile even more. She interpreted my silence as submission, as defeat. How wrong she was. "Eleanor, dear mother-in-law." Tiffany spoke in a honeyed voice, but full of condescension. She walked over and sat in the armchair opposite me, crossing her legs with studied elegance. "I think it is time to clarify a few things. This apartment needs changes. Ethan and I are a young, modern couple. We cannot live surrounded by old things." When she said old things, she looked directly at me. The message was clear. I was part of those old things they wanted to eliminate. "Babe is right, Mom." Ethan sat next to Tiffany, taking her hand as if he needed her support to face his own mother. "Tiffany and I have been talking. We think it would be better if you considered moving to a smaller place, more appropriate for a person of your age." There it was. The bomb they had been preparing for weeks finally exploded. They wanted to kick me out of my own apartment, out of the place where I had lived for 25 years, where I had raised my son alone after his father abandoned us when Ethan was barely 7 years old, where every piece of furniture, every plate, every curtain had been bought with my sweat and effort. "I understand," was the only thing I said. My voice sounded calm, almost indifferent. Tiffany and Ethan exchanged looks of surprise. Clearly, they expected screaming, tears, begging. They did not know that I, Eleanor Vance, had learned a long time ago that the best battles are won in silence. "You understand?" Tiffany arched a perfectly shaped eyebrow. "That is great, Eleanor. I thought you were going to get complicated. Look, it is nothing personal. It is just that Ethan and I need our space. We are going to start a family soon, and this apartment is perfect for us." "For you two," I repeated, nodding slowly. "Of course, exactly." Ethan seemed relieved that I was not making a scene. "Mom, you understand. Tiffany is used to a certain standard of living. Her family has money. She grew up in a big house, with all the amenities. She cannot live in a place so modest. And besides, you would be better off in a smaller apartment, without so many stairs. At your age, stairs can be dangerous. At my age, as if I were 90 years old and on the brink of the grave, I was 65. I was perfectly healthy and could climb those stairs better than half the people in this building." "Ethan is right, Eleanor." Tiffany leaned forward, feigning concern. "Besides, think about how expensive it is to maintain this place. The HOA fees, the utilities, everything has gone up so much. We can handle those expenses because Ethan has a good job, and my family can help us. But for you alone, it must be a terrible burden." I wanted to laugh. I wanted to laugh in her face until tears rolled down my cheeks. Because what Tiffany did not know, what neither of them knew, was that this apartment had no mortgage. It was mine, completely paid off. The deed was in my name, kept in a safe deposit box at the bank along with other documents they had never seen. But I said none of that. Not yet. "So, Mom, do you agree?" Ethan asked, squeezing Tiffany's hand tenderly. "We can start looking for a place for you next week. Something small, comfortable, maybe out in the suburbs where the rent is cheaper. I am going to think about it, I answered finally, getting up from the sofa. I took my empty cup and walked toward the kitchen. Think about it? Tiffany's voice went up an octave. Eleanor, there is not much to think about. We already made the decision. Ethan and I need you to move out in 2 months, tops. I stopped at the entrance to the kitchen and turned slowly to look at her. She held my gaze with that arrogant confidence of someone who believes they have all the power. Ethan was next to her, nodding like an obedient puppy. 2 months, I repeated. Okay. Tiffany's smile widened. She had won. Oh, that is what she thought. That night, while they celebrated in their room with champagne they had bought with Ethan's credit card, I sat in my small bedroom down the hall. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and took out a brown folder I had kept for years. Inside were all the documents for the apartment. The original deed in my name. The mortgage payoff letter from 10 years ago. The papers that proved I was the sole and legitimate owner of these 4 walls. There were also other documents. Documents I had obtained 3 weeks ago when I started to suspect that something was very wrong with Tiffany. Private investigations that cost me $500 but were worth every penny. Information about who my daughter-in-law really was. Her true past, her debts, her lies. I smiled in the darkness of my room. Tiffany thought I was a foolish and weak old woman. She thought she could take everything I had built with my life, but what she did not know was that I had survived much worse things than a spoiled and manipulative girl. I closed the folder and put it back in its place. It was not the time yet. First, I would let them believe they had won. I would let them show their true nature. And when the right moment came, when they were completely confident and exposed, then I would act. For now, I just needed to be patient and observe. Because revenge, when served cold and calculated, tastes much better than any impulsive reaction. And I, Eleanor Vance, had learned in my 65 years of life that the women who survive are not the ones who scream the loudest. They are the ones who know how to wait for the perfect moment to strike back. The following days were a calculated torture. Tiffany wasted no time in establishing her reign of terror in my own apartment. Every morning I woke up to the sound of her heels, clicking on the floor, walking back and forth as if she were inspecting her new property. She had taken control of everything, from the kitchen to the living room, rearranging furniture and throwing away objects that, according to her, were useless. The first drastic change came on a Tuesday morning. I was making coffee in the kitchen when Tiffany walked in with a large cardboard box in her hands. She dropped it on the table with a dry thud that made the cups rattle. "Eleanor, I need you to pack all these things," she said without even looking me in the eyes. "The old photos, the ugly knickknacks, everything you have scattered around the living room. I already hired a decorator, and he is coming tomorrow to take measurements. He cannot see this place full of antique junk." Antique junk. That is what she called my memories. The photographs of Ethan when he was a child, smiling without his baby teeth. The ceramic figure my mother gave me before she died. The wall clock that had marked every important moment of my life for 25 years. "Those things have sentimental value to me," I replied calmly, pouring my coffee into a chipped mug. Sentimental value does not pay the bills or make a place look good. Tiffany crossed her arms, looking at me with that expression of superiority that was already familiar to me. Besides, Ethan agrees with me. He also thinks this place needs a complete renovation. Right, babe? Ethan had just walked into the kitchen, still in his pajamas, although it was already 9 in the morning. He worked from home as a graphic designer, which meant I now had to endure the presence of both of them all day, every day. "Yeah, Mom." Ethan avoided my gaze as he opened the refrigerator. "Tiffany is right. The apartment needs updating. It is for the good of everyone. For the good of everyone," I repeated in a low voice, almost to myself. That afternoon, while they went out to meet with the decorator, I started packing my things in the box Tiffany had left. Every photograph I wrapped in newspaper was like tearing a piece of my heart. There was Ethan on his first day of school, with his new backpack and his proud smile. There we were at his college graduation, me crying with happiness because my son had achieved what I never could. There was my wedding photo, with that man who promised to love me forever and left when things got tough. I put everything in the back of my closet, hiding 22 years of memories as if they were something to be ashamed of. The next day, the decorator arrived promptly at 10 in the morning. He was a young man, about 30, dressed entirely in black and wearing designer glasses that probably cost more than my clothes for a whole year. Tiffany greeted him as if he were a movie star, with hugs and kisses on the cheeks. "Julian, darling, thank you for coming so quickly." Tiffany took him by the arm and began to walk him around the apartment. "As I told you on the phone, I need this place to look modern, elegant, sophisticated. No old or outdated stuff. I want it to look like it came out of an architectural digest." Julian walked through the living room taking notes on his tablet, nodding at every comment Tiffany made. I was sitting in a corner of the sofa, invisible to both of them. At one point, Julian pointed toward me without even turning around. "And her?" he asked, with clinical curiosity. "She also lives here." "Oh, she is Eleanor, my mother-in-law." Tiffany waved her hand dismissively. "Do not worry about her. She is going to move out soon. In 2 months max, she will not be here." The way she said it, so casual, so definitive, as if I were a piece of furniture they were going to donate to charity. Julian did not even say hello to me. He simply continued taking measurements and talking to Tiffany about color palettes and fabric textures. I was thinking of gray and white tones for the living room. Tiffany gestured with enthusiasm, with gold accents. "Of course, we definitely need to change that horrible sofa. I want an Italian leather one of those that cost at least $3,000. $3,000 for a sofa. I had bought mine for $200 at a clearance sale 20 years ago, and it had lasted me all this time. But of course, for Tiffany, if something did not cost a fortune, it was not worth having." "And the budget?" Julian asked while typing on his tablet. "No problem with the budget." Tiffany smiled confidently. "Ethan has a good income, and my family can help us with whatever we need. I calculate we can spend about $15,000 in total. Maybe $20,000 if it turns out really spectacular." $20,000. I almost choked on my own saliva. That amount of money was more than I had earned in 2 years working at the textile plant. And she was talking about spending it as if it were $20 at the grocery store. Ethan appeared from his makeshift office in what used to be the guest room. He was wearing headphones and looked stressed. "Tiffany, can we talk for a moment?" His voice sounded tense. "I am busy, babe. Julian is here taking measurements for the renovation." "It is important," Ethan insisted. "I just checked the bank accounts." Tiffany frowned, but followed him to his office. Julian took advantage of that moment to make some phone calls, walking around the living room as if the apartment were already his. I remained seated in my corner, listening. The walls of this apartment were thin. I could hear perfectly when Ethan began to speak with a worried voice. "Tiffany, we cannot spend $20,000 on decoration. We already spent $4,000 on your wedding dress, $3,000 on the honeymoon, and $1,500 on that jewelry last week. My savings are draining too fast." "Ethan, do not be dramatic." Tiffany's voice sounded irritated. "Your mother is going to move out soon. Once we sell this apartment, we will recover all the money and more. Meanwhile, we need to live well. I did not marry you to live in a place that looks like it is from the 80s. I felt the blood freeze in my veins. Sell the apartment? My apartment? Now Tiffany had truly crossed a line of no return. "I do not know if we can sell it so easily." Ethan sounded doubtful. "We would have to talk to Mom about the papers and all that. Your mother already agreed to move. The papers are just a formality. Trust me, Ethan. My father is a lawyer. He can help us with all the documentation. Once Eleanor signs some transfer documents, the apartment will be ours, and we can do whatever we want with it." Transfer documents. How convenient. How perfectly planned. Tiffany did not just want to kick me out of my house, she wanted to steal it completely. And my own son, whom I had raised with so much sacrifice, was participating in this robbery. I got up silently from the sofa and walked toward my room. I locked the door and took out the brown folder from my desk again. I opened it and reviewed every document carefully. The deed to the apartment was clear as water. Eleanor Vance, sole owner. There was no mention of Ethan anywhere. When I bought this place 25 years ago, I did it alone. With my money, with my credit. Ethan was not even of legal age back then. But there was more in that folder. The documents I had obtained about Tiffany were explosive. It turned out my dear daughter-in-law did not come from a rich family as she boasted. Her father was not a successful lawyer. He was an accountant who had lost his license 5 years ago for tax fraud. Her family was up to their necks in debt. Tiffany herself owed more than $30,000 in credit cards she had accumulated before meeting Ethan. She had seen my son as her financial salvation. A man with a steady job, with a decent income, and above all, with a mother who, according to her mistaken calculations, had an apartment they could sell to pay all her debts. I smiled bitterly as I put the documents away. Tiffany was a good actress, I had to admit it. During their entire courtship, she had played the role of the perfect girlfriend, the girl from a good family who had fallen madly in love with Ethan. And my son, blinded by her charms and her lies, had fallen into the trap without even questioning her. That night, during dinner, Tiffany was in an exceptionally good mood. Julian had sent her the first sketches of the renovation, and she would not stop showing them on her phone. "Look, Ethan, isn't it beautiful? The living room is going to look spectacular, and look at the dining room with that marble table I chose. It is going to be perfect for when we host dinner parties for our friends." I ate my plate of pasta in silence, observing them. Ethan nodded at everything Tiffany said, but I could see the worry in his eyes. The money issue was clearly affecting him, even if he did not want to admit it in front of his wife. "Eleanor," Tiffany finally deigned to address me. "Julian is going to start the work next week. We need you to stay in your room most of the time. The workers are going to be working in the living room and dining room, and we do not want you to get in the way." "Get in the way? In my own house?" "I understand," I replied simply. "Excellent." Tiffany smiled, satisfied. "And another thing, my mother is coming to visit us next weekend. I need the apartment to be spotless. I want you to deep clean everything before she arrives." Tiffany's mother. Perfect. Now I would have the opportunity to meet the woman who had raised this professional manipulator. Part of me was curious. The other part knew exactly what to expect. During the following days, Tiffany turned me into her personal maid. Every morning she had a new list of tasks waiting for me in the kitchen. Scrub the bathrooms until they sparkled, wash the curtains she had just bought, polish the floors, organize the pantry according to an absurd system she had seen in some internet video. Everything had to be perfect for her mother's visit. Ethan had practically disappeared. He locked himself in his office all day, avoiding the chaos his wife was creating. The few times he came out, he looked at me with a mixture of guilt and resignation. But he never said anything. He never defended me. He simply nodded to everything Tiffany ordered and went back to hiding behind his computer. On Friday afternoon, while I was on my knees cleaning the kitchen floor, I heard Tiffany's shrill voice from the living room. No. This is not right. Eleanor, come here immediately." I got up with difficulty, feeling my knees protest. At 65, being on my knees scrubbing floors for hours was not exactly easy. I walked to the living room, drying my hands on the apron Tiffany had insisted I wear. "What is wrong?" I asked, with the most neutral voice possible. Tiffany was standing next to the new sofa they had just delivered that morning. A white leather monster that had cost $3,500 and took up almost the entire living room. She was pointing at one of the cushions with a horrified expression. "There is a wrinkle here. Do you not see? The cushion is not perfectly smooth. My mother cannot see this. She is going to think we are sloppy. A wrinkle. A microscopic wrinkle on a cushion of a sofa that cost more than my salary for 6 months." I took a deep breath, counting to 10 in my mind. "I am going to fix it," I said simply. Not just that. Tiffany began to walk around the living room, inspecting every detail like a general reviewing his troops. "This vase is 2 centimeters out of place. The coffee table is not perfectly centered, and that painting on the wall is slightly tilted to the left. Can you not do anything right, Eleanor?" I clenched my fists inside my apron pockets. Every fiber of my being wanted to scream at her, tell her exactly what I thought of her and her snobbish mother. But I did not. It was not the time yet. "I will fix everything," I replied with icy calm. I spent the next 2 hours adjusting every object millimeter by millimeter until Tiffany was finally satisfied. When I finished, it was almost 8 at night. I had not eaten anything since breakfast. My feet hurt and my back was stiff from constantly bending over. Much better. Tiffany inspected the living room one last time. Now go make dinner. Nothing too complicated. Just a salad and grilled chicken. Ethan and I are going to watch a movie. She did not ask if I had eaten. She did not offer for me to sit and eat dinner with them. She simply gave me orders and settled onto her $3,000 sofa next to my son, who did not even look up from his phone to look at me. That night, after serving them dinner and washing all the dishes, I locked myself in my room. I took out my old phone, the one Ethan had tried to replace several times, saying I needed a more modern one, and dialed a number I had saved 3 weeks ago. "Good evening, Mrs. Vance." The professional voice of the private investigator answered on the second ring. "How can I help you?" "I need you to investigate someone else," I said in a low voice, making sure my door was tightly closed. "Tiffany's mother. Her name is Veronica Miller. I need to know everything about her. Her financial situation, her past, everything you can find." "Understood. I will send you a report in 3 days. The cost will be an additional $300. "No problem. You can use the same deposit account as last time." I hung up the phone and stared at the ceiling of my room. Every penny I was spending on these investigations was money I had saved for years working overtime at the plant, but it was worth it. I needed to know exactly who I was dealing with. I needed all the information possible before making my final move. Saturday dawned with Tiffany in total panic mode. Her mother would arrive at 2 in the afternoon and, according to her, there were still 1,000 things to do. She woke me up at 6 in the morning, pounding on my door. "Eleanor, get up. I need you to go buy fresh flowers, fruits for the fruit bowl in the living room, and some special pastries my mother loves. I made you a list." I took the list she extended and reviewed the items. Everything had to be from specific brands, from specific stores. I was going to have to go across half the city to get everything. "And the money?" I asked. Tiffany rolled her eyes. "Ethan will give you cash, but keep all the receipts. I want to see exactly what every dollar is spent on." I spent the whole morning going from store to store, carrying heavy bags on the bus because Tiffany had taken the car to go to the beauty salon. When I finally returned to the apartment, it was 12:30. I had an hour and a half to set everything up before the dreaded Veronica arrived. Finally, Tiffany practically ripped the bags from my hands. "Why did you take so long? Now we have less time. Quick, put the flowers in the big vase in the living room, the fruits go in the crystal bowl. And the pastries on that porcelain platter I bought last week." While I ran from one side to the other, following her increasingly hysterical orders, Ethan came out of his office. He was wearing a new shirt that Tiffany had clearly chosen for him. He looked uncomfortable, tugging at the collar as if the fabric were strangling him. "Is everything ready?" he asked nervously. "Almost." Tiffany looked at him with critical eyes. "Go comb your hair better. It looks messy. And please smile. I do not want my mother to think you are bitter." Ethan nodded obediently and went back to the bathroom. I finished placing the pastries on the porcelain platter and headed toward my room, hoping to hide there until this nightmare ended. "Where do you think you are going?" Tiffany's voice stopped me in my tracks. "To my room. I thought you would want privacy with your mother." "Oh no, Eleanor." Tiffany smiled maliciously. "You are going to stay here. You are going to serve the tea, the snacks, everything my mother needs. I want her to see that we have everything under control, that this is a well-managed household." What she really wanted to say was that she wanted her mother to see me as the servant, as proof that she had moved up in life. That now she had the power to order around someone older than her. At exactly 2 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Tiffany smoothed her dress, fixed her hair one last time, and took a deep breath before opening the door with a dazzling smile. "Mom, I am so happy you made it." The woman who walked into the apartment was an older, more bitter version of Tiffany. Veronica Miller was around 55, but she dressed as if she were 30. She wore a bright red power suit, sky-high heels, and more jewelry than any person would need to wear on a normal day. Her hair was dyed an artificial platinum blonde, and her makeup was so thick it looked like a mask. "My darling daughter," Veronica kissed the air next to Tiffany's cheeks, careful not to ruin her makeup. Her eyes scanned the apartment with an appraising expression. So this is the place. It is smaller than I imagined. It is cozy, Mom, Tiffany rushed to say, and it is in a great location. Besides, we already have plans for a full renovation. It is going to look spectacular. I see. Veronica walked into the living room, touching surfaces with her ring-laden fingers as if she were inspecting a property she planned to buy. She dropped onto the new sofa with an exaggerated sigh. At least the sofa is decent. How much did it cost? $3,500, Tiffany replied proudly. Not bad. Veronica nodded approvingly. Then her eyes landed on me, standing by the kitchen door like a ghost. And who is she? She is Eleanor, Ethan's mother. Tiffany waved her hand dismissively. I told you about her. She is going to move out soon. Ah, yes, the mother-in-law. Veronica looked me up and down with barely disguised contempt. Tiffany told me about your situation. How sad, isn't it, having to leave your home at your age? But well, that is life. Young people need their space. Ethan finally appeared from the hallway, hair perfectly combed and a forced smile on his face. Veronica, nice to see you again. He extended his hand, but she ignored it, looking at him with the same appraising expression she had used to inspect the apartment. Ethan, I hope you are taking good care of my daughter. Tiffany is used to a certain standard of living, you know. She cannot live like just any common person. Of course, ma'am. I do everything possible. Veronica did not seem convinced. Tiffany, darling, where is the tea? I am parched after the trip. Eleanor, please bring the tea, Tiffany ordered without looking at me. I went to the kitchen and prepared the tea in the new teapot Tiffany had bought specifically for this occasion. It cost $150. For a teapot, I placed everything on a tray along with the expensive sweets and returned to the living room. I served the tea with steady hands, although inside I felt humiliation burning my throat. Veronica did not even thank me. She simply took her cup and began to sip noisily while examining every corner of the apartment with critical eyes. So, Tiffany tells me you plan to sell this place, Veronica spoke between sips of tea. It is a smart decision. With what you get from the sale, you can buy something much better, maybe on the north side, where the decent people live. Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Well, we are still evaluating our options. There is nothing to evaluate, Ethan. Veronica looked at him sternly. A man of your age should have ambition. My daughter deserves to live in a place that reflects her status. This. She made a dismissive gesture encompassing the whole apartment. This is barely acceptable temporarily. I stayed standing by the wall, invisible, listening to this shameless woman talk about selling my apartment as if it were already a done deal, as if I were not standing right there, as if my opinion, my property, my life, mattered absolutely nothing. Mom is right, Ethan. Tiffany leaned toward her husband, taking his hand. We need to think about our future, about the children we will have. We cannot raise a family in such a limited place. Exactly. Veronica set her cup on the table with a clatter. And speaking of that, Tiffany, when do you plan to give me grandchildren? You have been married for 6 months. At your age, I had already been married 3 years and was pregnant with you. Tiffany blushed slightly. Soon. Mom, we need to get established first. Have our own house. Without complications. Complications. I was a complication. The woman who had given life to Ethan, who had raised him alone, who had sacrificed everything for him, was now simply a complication that had to be eliminated. Speaking of complications, Veronica looked directly at me for the first time. Eleanor, right? Tiffany told me you already agreed to move. Very sensible of you. At your age, it must be difficult to maintain such a big place. Have you found where you are going to live yet? All eyes landed on me. This was the moment. I could tell the truth right now. I could pull out the documents and end this whole charade. But something stopped me. The way Veronica looked at me, with that absolute superiority, the way Tiffany smiled, believing she had won. The way my own son avoided my gaze, ashamed, but not enough to defend me. No, it was not time yet. I am looking for options, I replied with a calm voice. Well, do not take too long. Veronica turned her attention back to Tiffany. The sooner she leaves, the sooner you can start your real life, without ties to the past. The conversation continued for the next 2 hours. Veronica talked non-stop about her rich friends, her trips to Europe, the jewelry her late husband had gifted her. According to her, she had lived her whole life in abundance, surrounded by luxury and comfort. Tiffany nodded at every word, reinforcing the image that she came from high society. I kept standing, serving more tea, more sweets, listening to every lie that came out of their mouths, because I knew the truth. The detective's report had arrived 2 days before. Veronica Miller was not the wealthy woman she pretended to be. Her husband had not been a successful businessman. He had been an accountant who lost his license for fraud and died leaving debts of over $50,000. Veronica lived in a rented apartment she could barely afford with her meager pension. The jewelry she was wearing were cheap knockoffs bought at discount stores. Everything was an elaborate facade, a perfectly constructed lie. And Tiffany had learned from the best. She had learned to lie, to manipulate, to build a false image to trap innocent men who could support her. "Eleanor, could you bring more water?" Tiffany's voice pulled me out of my thoughts. I went to the kitchen and filled a pitcher with cold water. As I returned to the living room, I heard part of the conversation they clearly did not want me to hear. "Are you sure she is going to sign the papers without a problem?" Veronica asked in a low voice. "Completely sure," Tiffany replied confidently. "I have her exactly where I want her. Ethan will convince her. He does what I tell him." "Good job, daughter. Once you have the money from the sale, you can pay off your debts and start from scratch. Maybe you could even help your poor mother with some of my outstanding bills." So that was the full plan. Not only did they want to steal my apartment, they wanted to use the money to pay Tiffany's debts and maintain Veronica's fake lifestyle. It was all a perfectly orchestrated scheme. I entered the living room making noise with my steps so they knew I was coming. Both shut up immediately and looked at me with fake smiles. "Thank you, Eleanor." Tiffany took the pitcher of water from my hands. "You can leave now. I need to talk to my mother in private." I retreated to my room, but left the door slightly ajar. Their voices kept drifting from the living room. "She is perfect for manipulating," I heard Veronica's voice. "Old, alone, clearly in need of affection. Ethan was a good choice, Tiffany. Men like him are easy to control." "I know, Mom. You taught me well," Tiffany laughed. "In a few more months, we will have all the money, and we can get rid of her completely. Ethan won't even have to keep contact with his mother if he doesn't want to." "Excellent. I always knew you were smart, daughter. Much smarter than your father, may he rest in peace. He never knew how to handle money. But you and I, we know how to get what we want." I sat on the edge of my bed, letting their words pierce through me. I no longer felt pain or sadness, only a cold determination. These women had completely underestimated the wrong person. I took out my phone and sent a message to the private investigator. "I need all the information ready for next week. Everything. Do not leave anything out." The response came in seconds. "Understood, Mrs. Vance. You will have a full report with documented evidence." That night, after Veronica finally left, Tiffany was in an excellent mood. She had ordered expensive food from an Italian restaurant, paid for, of course, with Ethan's credit card, and the two were celebrating in the living room as if they had just won the lottery. "My mother adores you, Ethan," Tiffany was telling him between laughs. "She said you are exactly the type of man she wanted for me." "I am glad she likes me," Ethan replied, though his voice sounded tired. "Are you okay, babe? You look worried." "It is just that. Tiffany, the expenses are increasing a lot. The renovation, the restaurant food, the shopping. My savings are going down very fast and my income is not enough to keep up this pace." "Ethan, we already talked about this." Tiffany put a hand on his arm with a conciliatory gesture. "It is just temporary. Once we sell the apartment, we will have enough money for years. You just need to be patient a little longer. And if Mom does not want to sell, what if it gets complicated?" "It is not going to get complicated." Tiffany's voice hardened slightly. "Your mother already agreed to move. The rest is just paperwork. My father can help us with that. Trust me, Ethan. Everything is going to turn out perfect. I listened to everything from my room. with the door ajar. Every word was one more nail in the coffin they were building for themselves. The following days were more of the same. Tiffany treated me worse and worse, now emboldened by her mother's successful visit. She ordered me to do the most degrading tasks, always with that cruel smile on her lips. Scrubbing the bathroom on my knees, washing her delicate underwear by hand because, according to her, the washing machine did not get it clean enough, organizing her closet by color and style. Ethan simply looked the other way. The few times I tried to talk to him, he found excuses to escape. He always had an important call, an urgent project, something to do in his office. My son had become a stranger, a puppet dancing to the rhythm, Tiffany said. One afternoon, while I was cleaning the kitchen after making them lunch, I heard Tiffany talking on the phone in the living room. Her voice sounded excited. "Yes, Dad. Ethan is on board. We just need Eleanor to sign some documents. No, she suspects nothing. She is a naive old woman. Yes, exactly. Once we have the deed transferred to Ethan's name, we can proceed with the sale. How much do you think it is worth?" "At least $200,000. Perfect. With that, we can pay everything off and have plenty left over to buy something better." $200,000. That was the approximate value of my apartment in the current market. Money I had earned with years of hard work, of sacrifice, of sleepless nights worrying about how to pay the next mortgage installment. And they planned to steal it all, as if it were their right. That night I made a decision. It was time to start moving my own pieces on this chessboard. I was not going to reveal everything yet, but I was going to start planting seeds of doubt, creating cracks in their perfect facade of control. The next day, during breakfast, I waited for Tiffany to be in a good mood. She was browsing furniture catalogs on her phone, marking the most expensive items with enthusiastic comments. "Tiffany," I said with a soft voice, almost timid, "I need to talk to you about something important." She looked up with an irritated expression, as if I had interrupted her in the middle of something crucial. "What do you want, Eleanor? I am busy." "It is about the apartment documents, for the move and all that." I paused, measuring her reaction. "I would like to review some papers before signing anything, for peace of mind." I watched her expression change instantly. The irritation transformed into something more calculated, more cautious. "Papers? There is nothing to review, Eleanor. They are just standard documents. My father is a lawyer, he will handle everything. You do not need to worry about anything. Still, I would like to see them. It is my right." "No." I kept my tone innocent, as if I really did not understand what was happening. Tiffany set her phone on the table with more force than necessary. "Ethan, can you talk to your mother? She is starting to complicate things unnecessarily." Ethan appeared from his office, with darker circles under his eyes than usual. He had been working late every night, probably trying to earn more money to keep up with Tiffany's spending pace. "What is wrong?" he asked, with a tired voice. "Your mother wants to review documents. She is mistrusting us." Tiffany crossed her arms, looking at me accusingly. "Mom, why are you making this difficult?" Ethan ran a hand through his hair. "Tiffany and I just want to help you. Find a better place for you, where you are more comfortable." "I know, son. I just want to understand what I am signing. It is normal." "No, it isn't." I looked him directly in the eyes, searching for some trace of the boy I had raised, of the young man who used to hug me and tell me I was the best mother in the world. For a second, just a second, I saw a flash of doubt in his gaze. But Tiffany got up quickly and took him by the arm. "Ethan, babe, you have that important meeting in 10 minutes. We cannot waste time with this now. We will talk to Eleanor later." She pushed him gently toward his office, throwing me a warning look before closing the door. I smiled inwardly. The seed was planted. Now I just had to water it with patience. During the next few days, I started asking more questions, seemingly innocent questions that made Tiffany increasingly nervous. When exactly would I have to move? Had they found a buyer for the apartment yet? Could I keep some of the money from the sale? Every question was a small dagger driven into her perfect plan. Tiffany responded with evasions and vague promises, but I could see her frustration growing. She had expected me to be submissive and obedient until the end. Now she realized that perhaps it would not be as easy as she thought. On Thursday afternoon, while I was in my room, I heard raised voices from the living room. It was Tiffany talking on the phone with her mother. "No, Mom. She is starting to ask questions." "Yes, about the documents. I do not know. Maybe someone told her something. Ethan is useless. He just hides in his office. I need Dad to speed up the process. The longer we wait, the harder it is going to get." Excellent. Panic was starting to set in. That night, Veronica appeared at the apartment again without prior notice. She was wearing the same flashy suit and the same attitude of superiority, but this time there was something different in her eyes, an urgency that hadn't been there before. "Eleanor, so good that you are here." Veronica did not even bother to greet me properly. "Tiffany told me you have some doubts about your move. I want to help clarify things." I sat on the sofa, maintaining an expression of innocent confusion. "I just want to understand what is going to happen with the apartment. It is my home for 25 years. It is natural that I have questions." Of course, of course." Veronica sat opposite me, with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Look, Eleanor, I know this must be difficult for you, leaving your house, starting over. But think about Ethan and Tiffany. They are young. They have their whole lives ahead of them. They need this space to grow, to start their own family. I understand that. But why do they need to sell the apartment? Couldn't they just stay here?" Veronica exchanged a quick glance with Tiffany, who was standing by the window with a tense expression. "The apartment is old, Eleanor. It needs expensive repairs. It is better to sell it now than to wait for it to devalue more." Veronica spoke with a condescending tone, as if she were explaining something to a small child. "Besides, with the money from the sale, Ethan and Tiffany can buy something better. And, of course, they would set aside an amount for you, so you can rent a comfortable place." "How much money would they set aside for me?" I asked, leaning forward with genuine interest. Veronica hesitated. Clearly, they had not thought about the details of that part of the lie. "Well, that would be discussed later. The important thing now is that you sign the transfer documents. My husband, may he rest in peace, was a lawyer, and I learned a lot from him. I can assure you that everything will be completely legal and fair. Your husband was an accountant, not a lawyer." The words left my mouth before I could stop them. The silence that followed was deafening. Veronica froze, her mouth slightly open. Tiffany took a step forward, eyes wide. "What did you say?" Veronica asked slowly. I realized I had made a mistake. I had revealed too much, too soon. I had to backtrack. "Oh, sorry. I think I heard wrong when Tiffany talked about him. I feigned confusion. Wasn't he an accountant? Surely I am confused. My memory is not what it used to be." Veronica studied me with narrowed eyes, looking for signs that I knew more than I was saying, but I maintained my confused old lady expression, and eventually she relaxed. "Yes, you must be confused," she said finally, although her voice sounded less sure. "Anyway, the important thing is that you trust us. We are family, Eleanor. Family does not hurt each other." How ironic coming from her. Veronica's visit ended shortly after, but the atmosphere in the apartment changed drastically. Tiffany looked at me with distrust now, studying my every move. There were several whispered conversations between her and Ethan that stopped abruptly when I entered the room. 2 days later, the package I had been waiting for arrived. The courier service knocked on the door at 11 in the morning. Tiffany was in the shower and Ethan in his office with headphones on, so I was the one who opened it. "Package for Eleanor Vance." The courier extended a large manila envelope. "That is me." I signed the receipt with trembling hands and closed the door quickly. The envelope contained the private investigator's full report. Everything was there. Bank documents showing Tiffany's debts. $32,000 across 5 different credit cards. Records of unpaid loans. Collection lawsuits. There was also information about Veronica. Her rented apartment that was about to be evicted for non-payment. The fake jewelry she used. The cars she had rented to feign wealth during social events. Everything was an elaborate lie. But the most interesting thing was at the end of the report. The detective had discovered something I had not specifically asked for, but that was pure gold. Tiffany had already been married before, 4 years ago, to a man named Michael Sterling, a successful businessman. That marriage had lasted barely a year before Michael discovered her using his credit cards without permission and racking up debt in his name. He had filed for divorce immediately and ensured she received nothing in the separation. Tiffany was a professional con artist. Ethan was not her first victim. He was just the next in line. I hid the envelope in the back of my closet, under a pile of old clothes. My heart was beating hard. Now I had everything I needed, all the ammunition necessary to completely destroy their plan. But I still had to be careful. I had to choose the perfect moment to reveal everything. That afternoon, Tiffany received a call that put her in an excellent mood. When she hung up, she practically danced over to where I was preparing dinner. "Eleanor, I have good news," she said in a honeyed voice. "My father finally prepared all the documents. We are going to have a small family meeting next Saturday. My parents, Ethan, you, and me. We will review everything, and you can sign the papers. Isn't it wonderful? Finally, we will be able to resolve this whole matter." Saturday arrived faster than I expected. Tiffany had spent the whole week preparing for this meeting as if it were the most important event of her life. And, in a way, it was. This was the day she planned to close her scam, get my signature on those fake documents, and steal everything I had built for 25 years. The meeting was scheduled for 3 p.m. Tiffany had ordered expensive food from a French bistro, bought wine at $150 a bottle, and arranged the living room as if we were receiving royalty. All paid for, of course, with Ethan's money, which was evaporating faster every day. I had dressed in my simplest, oldest clothes. A worn gray dress I had owned for years, comfortable shoes with no heel, hair pulled back in a simple bun. I wanted to look exactly how they saw me, a poor, vulnerable old woman, easy to manipulate. It was important they maintained that image until the last moment. At 2:30, the doorbell rang. Veronica entered first, wrapped in a faux fur coat that she had probably bought at a thrift store but passed off as authentic. Behind her came a man of about 60, thin, with thick glasses and a suit that was too big for him. This must be Richard, Tiffany's father, the supposed successful lawyer. "Eleanor, how nice to see you again." Veronica kissed the air near my cheeks, leaving a trail of cheap perfume. "Let me introduce you to my husband, Richard. He is the one who prepared all the documents to facilitate your move." Richard extended a sweaty hand. "Pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Vance. Veronica has told me a lot about you. The pleasure is mine." I shook his hand briefly. His eyes avoided mine, looking anywhere but at my face. A man used to lying, to hiding things. Tiffany appeared from the kitchen, radiant in a new dress that probably cost $300. "Dad, Mom, so glad you made it. Come in, come in. I have everything ready." Ethan came out of his office, looking paler and thinner than ever. The last few weeks had clearly taken a toll on him. He had lost weight, had deep circles under his eyes, and his hands shook slightly when he greeted his in-laws. But Tiffany did not seem to notice, or she did not care. We all sat around the dining table. Tiffany served the wine in expensive glasses she had bought especially for this occasion. I asked for only water. I needed to keep my mind completely clear for what was coming. Richard took out a worn leather briefcase and began to pull out documents. He placed them on the table with a serious expression, as if he really were a professional lawyer handling an important case. "All right, Eleanor." He began with a pompous voice. "These are the property transfer documents. As you can see here," he pointed to a section full of incomprehensible legal text. "This states that you voluntarily transfer ownership of the apartment to your son, Ethan. It is a completely legal and standard process." "Can I read the documents calmly?" I asked, extending my hand. Richard hesitated for a second, exchanging looks with Veronica and Tiffany. "Of course, but I warn you that legal language can be confusing. Maybe it is easier if I explain each section to you." "I prefer to read it myself," I insisted, taking the papers from his hands. The tension in the room was palpable. Tiffany drank her wine in quick sips, knuckles white around the glass. Veronica maintained a fixed smile, but her eyes watched me like a hawk. Ethan simply looked at his empty plate, avoiding the whole scene. I began to read the documents slowly. They were exactly what I expected, a complete fraud. The papers were drafted to make it look like I was voluntarily transferring ownership of the condo to Ethan without any financial compensation. There were hidden clauses that basically left me with no rights to the property. Once these documents were signed, I would have nothing. Not the apartment, not money, nothing. I see here it says the transfer is without financial consideration. I pointed to the clause with my finger. That is because it is a gift from mother to son, Richard responded quickly. A family transfer. That way you do not have to pay such high taxes. It is better for everyone. And where does it say how much money you will give me to rent another place? Another awkward silence. Tiffany finally spoke, with a voice that tried to sound sweet but came out tense. Eleanor, we already talked about this. Once we sell the apartment, Ethan will give you a share. But first we need to have the property in his name to be able to sell it. And what if you give me nothing afterwards? I asked with genuine curiosity. Once I sign this, legally I will have no rights. What guarantee do I have? Richard cleared his throat uncomfortably. You have your son's word. Do you not trust your own son, Eleanor? All eyes turned to Ethan. He finally looked up, looking at me with a mixture of guilt and desperation. Mom, I promise you we are going to help you. Just sign the papers. Please, trust me. I looked at my son, at this man I had raised, and wondered at what moment I had lost him. When exactly had he stopped being the affectionate boy who hugged me and told me he loved me? When had he become this weak, manipulated man capable of stealing from his own mother? I need to think about it, I said finally, leaving the documents on the table. Think about it? Tiffany's voice went up an octave. Eleanor, you already had weeks to think. My parents came all the way here specifically for this. You cannot waste our time like this. I am not wasting anyone's time. I kept my voice calm, firm. These documents are about my property. I have the right to take the time I need to decide. Veronica leaned forward with her best performance of a concerned woman. Eleanor, dear, I know this is hard for you, but think about Ethan. Think about your son. He needs this. He needs to be able to give Tiffany the life she deserves. Do you not want your son to be happy? Of course I want my son to be happy, I replied, looking directly at Ethan. But happiness is not built on theft and deceit. The words fell like bombs on the table. Tiffany dropped her wineglass, which shattered on the floor into 1,000 pieces. Richard went pale. Veronica opened her mouth, but no sound came out. What did you say? Tiffany finally managed to speak, voice trembling with fury. I stood up slowly from my seat. My heart was beating hard, but my voice came out firm and clear. I said I am not going to sign anything. Because this apartment is mine. I bought it, I paid for it, and no one is going to take it from me. Mom, what are you saying? Ethan stood up too, looking confused and scared. I thought you had agreed to move. I agreed to consider moving, if that was my wish. But I never said I was going to give away my property. And I definitely never said you were going to sell it to pay Tiffany's debts. The color completely drained from Tiffany's face. What debts are you talking about? I do not have debts. No? I walked to my room, conscious that everyone was following me with their gaze. I took the manila envelope from the closet and returned to the living room. So, what are these? I dropped the envelope on the table, the documents scattered, showing bank statements, collection letters, legal lawsuits, all with the name, Tiffany Miller, clearly visible. Richard jumped to his feet. Where did you get that? Those are private documents. You had no right to investigate my daughter. I had every right when she tried to steal my property, I replied coldly. $32,000 in debts, Tiffany. 5 maxed-out credit cards. Unpaid loans. And that is just what is officially recorded. Tiffany shook her head frantically. That is a lie. Ethan, babe, she is lying. She is inventing all this because she does not want us to be happy. I am not inventing anything. I pulled another document from the pile, and here is something even more interesting. Your previous marriage to Michael Sterling, the man you also tried to rob before he discovered you. The silence that followed was absolute. Ethan looked at Tiffany with wide eyes, as if he were seeing a stranger. You were married before? His voice was barely a whisper. Ethan, I can explain. Tiffany tried to approach him, but Ethan stepped back. How many other things did you lie to me about? That does not matter now. Veronica intervened, pointing an accusing finger at me. This meddlesome old woman has no right to ruin my daughter's life. Tiffany made mistakes in the past. So what? We all make mistakes. Trying to steal is not a mistake. My voice resonated in the room. It is a crime. And you three. I looked at Veronica, Richard, and Tiffany, one by one. You three came here today with the intention of robbing me of everything I have. You thought I was a foolish and weak old woman who would sign any paper without asking questions. Richard tried to regain his composure, adjusting his glasses with trembling hands. Eleanor, I think you are misinterpreting the situation. We just wanted to help facilitate a family transition. There is nothing criminal in that. There is nothing criminal? I pulled another document from my envelope. These papers you brought are full of fraudulent clauses. You are not a lawyer, Richard. You lost your CPA license 5 years ago for tax fraud. Did you really think you could fool me? Richard recoiled as if I had hit him physically. Veronica looked at him with horror, probably realizing that her perfect plan was crumbling before her eyes. You investigated us, Veronica stuttered. How dare you? We are your daughter-in-law's family. Exactly, I replied with icy calm. You are the family of the woman who tried to steal my house. I had to know who I was dealing with. And let me tell you, Veronica, your act as a rich woman was very convincing. But I know the truth. I know you live in a rented apartment you are about to lose for non-payment. I know your jewelry is fake. I know your husband was not a successful businessman, but a failed accountant who left you in ruins. Veronica collapsed in her chair, her face crumbling. All her masks of elegance and superiority vanished in an instant, leaving only a desperate and defeated woman. Ethan kept looking at Tiffany, waiting for some explanation, some credible denial. But Tiffany just cried, makeup running down her cheeks, destroying the image of perfection she had always projected. Ethan, please. Tiffany tried to take his hand, but he pulled it away. I love you. Everything I did was for us. We needed that money to start our life together. Start our life? Ethan looked at her with disbelief. Or pay your debts? How much of what you told me is true, Tiffany? Some. I do love you. That is true. Tiffany sobbed now, her whole body shaking. But you lied to me about everything else. Your family, your past, your finances. Ethan ran his hands through his hair, looking completely shattered. You made me participate in a plan to steal from my own mother. How could you? Because she has everything and we had nothing. Tiffany screamed suddenly, with all her desperation surfacing. She lives in this big apartment while I couldn't even pay my rent. It is not fair. She is old. She already lived her life. We are still starting. The absolute lack of shame in her words left me breathless. Even now, exposed and trapped, Tiffany still believed she had the right to rob me because, according to her twisted logic, I had already lived enough. Enough. My voice cut the air like a whip. I want the three of you out of my apartment right now. And you too, Tiffany. You have a week to pack your things and get out. You cannot kick me out. Tiffany jumped to her feet. I am Ethan's wife. This is my home too. This is my apartment. I pulled the last document from my envelope, the property deed with my name clearly visible, only my name is on these papers. Ethan never had any legal right to this place, and you, as his wife, neither. Ethan took the deed with trembling hands, reading every word as if he couldn't believe what he saw. Mom, I thought. I always assumed this apartment would be mine someday. And maybe it would have been, I said softly, feeling my heart break, seeing the realization in his eyes. If you had been the son I raised, if you had defended me when your wife treated me like trash, if you had the courage to say no when they planned to rob me. But you didn't, Ethan. You stayed silent and let this happen. Tears began to run down my son's cheeks. I am sorry, Mom. I am so sorry. I didn't want things to go this far. Tiffany told me everything would be fine, that it was just a family arrangement. A family arrangement that would leave me homeless and penniless, I replied, feeling my own voice crack slightly. Did you really believe that, Ethan? Or was it simply easier to believe it than to face the truth? Ethan did not answer. He just dropped into a chair, head in his hands. Richard tried one last desperate strategy. Eleanor, be reasonable. We can reach an agreement. It is not necessary for this to get ugly. Think about Ethan, about your son. I am thinking about my son. I stared at him. And that is why I want this woman and her family of con artists out of our lives before they destroy him completely. Veronica got up with difficulty, clutching her purse with trembling hands. This is not going to stay like this. We are going to sue. We are going to. You are going to sue with what money? I interrupted. According to my investigations, you can barely pay your own rent. Go ahead. Try to sue me. I have all the legal documents on my side. I have proof of your attempted fraud. Do you really want this to reach the courts? Veronica closed her mouth, defeated. Richard was already putting his fake documents back in his briefcase, avoiding looking anyone in the eyes. Let's go. Veronica took Richard by the arm. This place stinks anyway. As Tiffany's parents headed for the door, Tiffany made one last desperate attempt. She knelt in front of Ethan, taking his hands in hers. Ethan, please. We can fix this. We can start over. Just you and me. We will look for our own place. We do not need this apartment. I just need you. Ethan looked at her for a long moment. For a second, I thought that maybe he would fall under her spell again, that his weakness for her would win. But then he pulled his hands away gently. No, Tiffany. I can no longer trust you. You lied to me about everything. About who you are, where you come from, what you wanted from me. Our entire marriage was a lie. That is not true. I do love you. Tiffany sobbed desperately now. Maybe you love me in your own way. Ethan stood up, moving away from her. But your love comes with conditions, with hidden plans, with lies. That is not the kind of love I want in my life. Tiffany remained kneeling on the floor, crying like a small child who had her favorite toy taken away. But I felt no pity for her. She had chosen this path. She had chosen to lie, manipulate, steal, and now she was facing the consequences. You have a week, I repeated firmly. 7 days to pack your things and find another place. After that, if you are still here, I will call the police. Tiffany finally got up, wiping her tears with trembling hands. She looked at me with so much hatred that for a moment I thought she might physically attack me. But then she looked at Ethan, searching for some support, some sign that he was still on her side. She found nothing. You are going to regret this, she said with a venomous voice. Both of you, especially you, you bitter old woman. You ruined my life. You ruined your own life with your decisions. I responded calmly. I just defended myself. Tiffany left the room in a fury, her heels striking the floor violently. We heard her open the door of the room she shared with Ethan and start throwing things, cursing me loudly. Ethan and I were left alone in the living room. The apartment that had been a battlefield now seemed strangely quiet. We looked at each other for the first time in months, really, without the masks, without the tension. Mom, Ethan started, but his voice broke. I know, I said softly. I know, son. Can you forgive me someday? There was so much pain in his eyes, so much regret. I do not know, Ethan. I need time to process all this. You hurt me deeply. You betrayed me in the worst way possible. I know, and I am going to live with that guilt for the rest of my life. He wiped his tears with the back of his hand. I was weak. I was stupid. I let myself be manipulated because I wanted to believe that someone like Tiffany could really love me. Someone can love you, I told him. Someone honest, genuine, who sees you for who you really are. But not Tiffany. She never loved you. She only loved what she thought she could get from you. Ethan nodded slowly, accepting the painful truth. What am I going to do now? You are going to start over, I replied. You are going to divorce that woman. You are going to rebuild your life. And if you are lucky, maybe someday we can rebuild our relationship too. The following days were a controlled chaos. Tiffany refused to talk to anyone, locking herself in the room most of the time. When she came out, she shot me looks full of poison, but she no longer tried to manipulate or control anything. She knew she had lost. Ethan had contacted a lawyer to start divorce proceedings, which only increased Tiffany's fury. On the 3rd day after the confrontation, while I was making coffee in the kitchen, I heard the apartment door open. It was early, barely 7 in the morning. I peeked out and saw Tiffany leaving with a large suitcase. She wore dark glasses that hid her eyes, but I could see the tear tracks on her cheeks. I said nothing, I just watched her go, closing the door behind her with more force than necessary. Ethan appeared from his room moments later, looking like he hadn't slept in days. "She left?" he said simply, looking at the closed door. "She left a note, saying she would come for the rest of her things when she found a place." Ethan dropped onto the sofa, that expensive sofa Tiffany had insisted on buying. "Mom, how could I be so blind?" I sat next to him, maintaining a certain distance. The wound between us was still very fresh, because you wanted to believe in something beautiful, in love, in a happy future. Tiffany was a very good actress. She knew exactly what to show you so you would fall in love. I spent almost all my savings on her. Ethan rubbed his face with his hands, the furniture, the clothes, the outings to expensive restaurants, all to maintain an image she demanded. Now I have barely $3,000 in the bank. I felt a pang of pain for my son. Despite everything he had done, he was still my boy. The same boy who cried when he fell off his bike, who hugged me when he had nightmares, who promised me he would always take care of me. "You will be able to recover financially," I told him. "Money can be earned again, but you need to learn from this, Ethan. You need to learn to see people for who they really are, not for who you want them to be." "I know." His voice was barely a whisper. "Mom, I know I hurt you in unforgivable ways. I let Tiffany treat you like trash in your own house. I participated in a plan to steal from you. I do not expect you to forgive me, but I need you to know I am deeply sorry." I looked at my son, watching the tears run down his cheeks. Part of me wanted to hug him, tell him everything was okay, that I forgave him completely, but I couldn't. Not yet. The betrayal had been too deep. "Forgiveness takes time, Ethan," I said finally. "And it requires you to show with actions, not just words, that you have truly changed. I will do whatever is necessary." Ethan looked at me with determination. "I am going to pay for the divorce myself. I am not going to ask you for financial help. And I am going to move out as soon as I can find a place I can afford. You do not have to leave immediately." The words came out before I could stop them. "You can stay until you get back on your feet financially, but with conditions." Ethan nodded quickly. "Whatever they are. You pay your share of the utilities. You clean your own mess. And more importantly, we go to family therapy, both of us, to try to heal what broke between us. I accept everything." Ethan extended his hand toward mine, but I did not take it yet. He understood, withdrawing his hand slowly. "Thank you, Mom, for giving me another chance." During the next few weeks, we slowly began to rebuild something that resembled a mother-son relationship. Ethan kept every one of his promises. He found a family therapist, and we attended sessions twice a week. They were difficult sessions, full of tears and painful confessions. Ethan admitted he had felt inadequate his whole life, that he had sought validation in wrong relationships, that he had allowed his need to be loved to blind him to danger signs. I also had to face my own flaws. I admitted that perhaps I had been too protective, that I hadn't taught Ethan to defend himself from manipulative people, that I had assumed my unconditional love was enough to protect him from the world. Tiffany returned only once more, 3 weeks after leaving, to pick up the rest of her belongings. She arrived with her mother, Veronica, both looking defeated and tired. There were no longer traces of the arrogance and superiority they used to project. They were simply two women who had bet everything on a plan that failed. "We just want Tiffany's things," Veronica said in a monotone voice when I opened the door. "We are not going to cause trouble." I let them pass, watching from the kitchen while they packed clothes, shoes, accessories. Tiffany avoided looking at me, focusing completely on her task. When they finished, Ethan appeared with a box containing wedding photos and other memories. "I thought maybe you would want this." Ethan extended the box to Tiffany. She took it without a word. For a moment, our gazes crossed. I saw in her eyes something I hadn't seen before. Genuine shame. Not regret for trying to steal from me, but shame for having been caught, for having failed. "I am sorry things ended like this," Tiffany said finally, although it was unclear if she was speaking to me or Ethan. "Me too," Ethan replied. "I hope you find whatever you are looking for, Tiffany. But I hope next time you do it honestly." Tiffany left the apartment, followed by Veronica, carrying boxes and suitcases. I watched them walk away down the hall, two figures getting smaller with every step. I closed the door and took a deep breath. This chapter of our lives was finally over. 2 months later, I received an unexpected call. It was Michael Sterling, Tiffany's ex-husband. He had gotten my number through the private investigator I had hired. "Mrs. Vance, I am so sorry to bother you." His voice sounded kind over the phone. "I heard what happened with Tiffany and your son. I wanted to warn you about something important." "Warn me." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Tiffany is trying to do the same thing again. She met an older man, a widower, with properties. She is already dating him. I thought you should know, in case she tries something against you or your son again." I thanked him for the information and hung up, feeling a mixture of pity and disgust. Tiffany would never learn. She would keep looking for victims, building lies, trying to steal what others had worked hard to achieve. But it was no longer my problem. I had protected what was mine. I had saved my son before it was too late. Ethan had started to rebuild his life. He got a new major client that paid well, which allowed him to start rebuilding his savings. He had moved into a small but comfortable apartment near mine. We continued in therapy, slowly working on rebuilding trust. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. One afternoon, while we shared coffee in my living room, Ethan looked at the photographs I had hung back on the walls. The same photographs Tiffany had made me pack as if they were trash. "I remember the day they took this one." Ethan pointed to a photo of his college graduation. "You were so proud of me." "I am still proud of you," I said honestly. "You made terrible mistakes, yes, but you are learning from them. That is what matters." "Do you think I will ever be able to trust someone again?" Ethan asked. "After all this?" "Yes," I replied firmly. "But this time you will know the warning signs. This time you won't ignore your gut when something doesn't feel right. Tiffany taught you a hard lesson, but a necessary one." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "There is something I never asked you, Mom. When you discovered everything about Tiffany, why did you wait so long to expose everything? You could have done it the first day." I smiled slightly. "Because I needed you two to reveal yourselves completely. I needed you to show exactly how far you were willing to go. If I had exposed everything at the beginning, Tiffany would have found an excuse. She would have manipulated the situation. She would have convinced you I was exaggerating. But by letting you continue until the end, until the moment of signing the fraudulent documents, there was no way to deny your intentions." "It was smart," Ethan admitted. "Painful, but smart. Sometimes love requires difficult decisions," I told him. "Letting you fall was the hardest thing I have ever done, but it was necessary for you to open your eyes." Months passed, and life began to find a new rhythm. Ethan visited regularly, but now it was different. He no longer came with guilt dragging behind him like a shadow. He came with genuine humility, with a desire to rebuild what we had lost. He brought flowers occasionally, not the expensive ones Tiffany would have demanded, but simple bouquets from the farmer's market that he knew I loved. On a Saturday afternoon, 6 months after everything exploded, Ethan arrived with an unusual expression on his face. There was some nervousness, but also hope. "Mom, there is someone I want you to meet," he said as he entered the apartment. My first instinct was panic. Another Tiffany? Had he learned nothing? But then I saw the woman entering behind him. She was simple, dressed in jeans and a common blouse, without excessive makeup or flashy jewelry. She wore glasses, and her smile was shy but genuine. "Mom, this is Sarah. We met in a support group for people leaving toxic relationships." Ethan introduced her carefully. "I wanted you to meet her, but only if you feel comfortable." Sarah extended her hand. "Mrs. Vance, Ethan has told me everything. I completely understand if you do not want me here. I just wanted to say hello and tell you I admire your strength very much." I looked at her carefully, searching for signs, red flags, any indication of manipulation. But I saw only sincerity. And more importantly, I saw how Ethan looked at her, not with the blind desperation he had with Tiffany, but with something calmer, more mature. "It is a pleasure to meet you, Sarah." I shook her hand. "Would you like to stay for coffee?" During the next few hours, we talked. Sarah was an elementary school teacher. She lived in a modest apartment she paid for with her own salary, and she had come out of a marriage where her ex-husband had manipulated her financially for years. She understood the pain of betrayal, the difficulty of rebuilding trust. And more importantly, she had no unrealistic expectations about Ethan or life. "I am not looking for someone to rescue me," Sarah explained as she drank her coffee. "I already rescued myself. I am just looking for someone to build something real with, honest, without lies." After they left that afternoon, I sat on my sofa, the same sofa where it had all started months ago. The apartment felt different now, lighter, as if a dark weight had finally been lifted. A week later, I received another unexpected call. This time, it was a lawyer representing Veronica Miller. "Mrs. Vance, my client wishes to offer you a formal apology." The professional voice on the other end of the line sounded bored, as if reading a script. "She also wants you to know that she will not attempt any type of legal action against you or your son." "I did not expect her to," I replied dryly. "She has no legal basis to sue." "Correct." The lawyer cleared his throat. "She also asked me to communicate that Tiffany has moved abroad, to Europe. She met someone there and decided to start over. Another victim," I thought with sadness. But it was not my responsibility to save the world from Tiffany. I had only been able to save my son, and that would have to be enough. "I appreciate the call," I said politely before hanging up. Months turned into a year. Ethan and Sarah were still together, building their relationship slowly, with therapy and honest communication. I had returned to my routine, but now with a peace I hadn't felt in a long time. The apartment was mine again, without invaders, without manipulators, without lies. One afternoon, while organizing some old documents, I found the photographs I had packed when Tiffany ordered me to hide them. I looked at them one by one, remembering every captured moment. Ethan as a child, smiling toothlessly. Ethan as a teenager, with his first computer I had saved months to buy him. Ethan graduating, with tears of pride in my eyes. And then I found a photograph I had forgotten I had. It was of me, taken 30 years ago, when I had just bought this apartment. I was standing in front of the building with the keys in my hand, smiling with a mixture of pride and fear. I was young, just divorced. I had a small child to support, and yet I had managed to buy my own place, my own piece of security in this uncertain world. I looked at that young woman in the photograph and felt a deep connection with her. She had been strong then, fighting against all odds. And I had been strong now, defending what she had built. The doorbell snapped me out of my thoughts. It was Ethan, but this time he came with Sarah and a large box. "What is this?" I asked as I let them in. "Open it." Ethan was smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. Genuine, without shadows. I opened the box and found a new photo album, beautifully bound. On the first page was a recent photo of Ethan and me, taken during one of our family therapy sessions. We were both smiling, and although the smile still carried traces of everything we had gone through, it was real. "Sarah and I thought you needed new memories," Ethan explained. "Good memories to fill this album, to replace all the pain of last year." Tears began to roll down my cheeks. Not tears of sadness, but of relief, of gratitude, of hope. "We also have something else to tell you," Sarah spoke with a soft voice. "Ethan and I are getting married. But this time it will be different. It will be a small, honest wedding, without pretenses, and we want you to be part of every decision. Nothing will be done without your approval." "You do not need my approval," I said, wiping my tears. "You are adults. You can make your own decisions." "Yes, but we want your blessing." Ethan knelt in front of me, taking my hands in his. "Mom, I know I failed you in the worst ways possible. I let a manipulative woman almost destroy everything you built. But you gave me the chance to learn, to grow, to become the man you taught me to be. I am not going to waste this second chance." I looked at my son, seeing the man he had become. He was no longer the weak puppet Tiffany had handled. He was someone stronger, wiser, more aware of his own weaknesses and strengths. "You have my blessing," I said finally. "And my love. You have always had my love, even in the darkest moments." We hugged, the three of us, forming a circle of healing and hope. The apartment that had been a battlefield was now a refuge again, a place where real love, honest love, could flourish. That night, after Ethan and Sarah left, I sat by the window looking at the city. I thought about Tiffany, wherever she was, hoping that someday she would learn that true wealth does not come from stealing or manipulating, but from building something of your own with honest effort. I thought about Veronica and Richard, trapped in their own lies and desperation. And I thought about all the people who underestimate others because of their age, their appearance, their apparent vulnerability. I had been underestimated. They had thought I was a weak old woman, easy to manipulate and control. They hadn't seen the strength I had developed over 65 years of life. They hadn't understood that a woman who had raised a son alone, who had bought her own apartment, who had survived a divorce and decades of struggle, would not give up without a fight. And I had fought. Not with violence or cruelty, but with intelligence, patience, and determination. I had waited for the perfect moment. I had gathered evidence. I had let them dig their own grave. And when the time came, I had acted with the precision of someone who knows exactly what she is worth and what she deserves. I opened my desk drawer and took out the brown folder containing all the documents I had used to expose them. For a moment I considered burning it, destroying all evidence of that dark chapter. But then I decided to keep it, not as a reminder of pain, but as evidence of my own strength, as proof that I had defended what was mine, and won. I closed the folder and put it away again. Tomorrow would be a new day. Ethan and Sarah would come for lunch. We would talk about wedding plans, hopes, and dreams. We would build new memories to fill that album they had given me. But tonight, in this moment of stillness, I allowed myself to feel pride. Pride for not giving up. Pride for saving my son from a professional con artist. Pride for proving that age does not equal weakness and that underestimating a woman who has survived decades of challenges is the biggest mistake anyone can make. I looked around my apartment, my home, my refuge that I had defended with everything I had. The photographs were back on the walls. The furniture I had chosen was in its place. The wall clock kept marking time, as it had for 25 years. Everything had returned to how it should be. I smiled in the darkness of the night, feeling a deep peace I hadn't felt in a long time. I had won, not with screams or cruel revenge, but with dignity, intelligence, and the unwavering determination to protect what was mine. And that victory, that recovery of my home and my son, was worth more than any amount of money in the world. Because in the end, what I had defended was not just a $200,000 apartment. It was my dignity, my history, my entire life, and no one, absolutely no one, had the right to take that away from me. The moon shone through my window, illuminating the living room where it had all started and where it had all ended. And I, Eleanor Vance, 65 years old, felt stronger and more alive than ever.